Cold weather has claimed more human lives than every battle ever fought, combined. Not one brutal winter, not one ice age. The total toll across hundreds of thousands of years of human prehistory was so relentless, so unforgiving, that it literally rewired how we think, how we bond, how we build, and how we survive. And here's the wild part. Ancient humans didn't just endure winter, they outsmarted it. With zero textbooks, zero labs, zero heating systems. Some of their solutions are so clever, so backwards from what you'd expect, that honestly, they should have won awards. Let's get into it, because some of these are going to make you see our ancestors in a completely different light. Okay, first one, and this is the one that sounds completely wrong until it clicks. Snow as insulation. Yeah, I know. Your instinct when you're surrounded by snow is get away from it, get inside, get warm, get away from the cold white stuff. Ancient humans did the exact opposite. They built into it, on purpose, enthusiastically. And the most famous example? The igloo. But here's what most people don't realize. The igloo isn't just a snow hut, it's applied physics. Packed snow has a surprisingly low thermal conductivity. Basically, heat doesn't travel through it easily. So a small group of people inside, with just one lamp burning animal fat, could keep the inside 30 to 40 degrees Celsius warmer than outside. In Arctic winters that drop to -50, that gap is the difference between waking up tomorrow and not. But the engineering goes even deeper. The entrance tunnel is always built lower than the sleeping area. Why? Because cold air is denser. It sinks. So the cold air literally gets trapped in the tunnel. The warmest air floats up to where people are sleeping. That's not luck. That's genius. The dome shape spreads the structural load so the whole thing supports itself. No beams, no poles. A small ventilation hole at the top handles air quality and temperature, and two experienced builders can throw one up in under 2 hours using nothing but a snow knife. Modern engineers have actually studied the igloo, trying to improve it for emergency shelter use. They couldn't. That's wild. And the Inuit weren't alone in figuring this out. Indigenous Siberian peoples slept in carved-out snow cavities. Ancient Scandinavian hunters packed snow against shelter walls to kill heat loss. Different cultures, same cold, same conclusion. Snow isn't the enemy. Used right, snow is the solution. All right, this next one sounds gross before it sounds brilliant. Fat, on the skin, everywhere. Ancient humans, from the Arctic to Ice Age Europe, would take rendered animal fat, bear fat, seal fat, caribou fat, whatever they had, and work it straight into their exposed skin before heading outside. Face, hands, anywhere the cold air could reach. And here's why it works. Fat is hydrophobic. It literally repels water. When you're outside in wind and cold, moisture on your skin accelerates heat loss dramatically. A layer of fat blocks that. It also creates a barrier between your skin and moving air, cutting down convective heat loss. Sound familiar? It should. Channel swimmers grease themselves up before hitting open water. Antarctic explorers slap on protective balm before stepping outside. Winter ultramarathon runners use petroleum jelly on their face. Same principle, thousands of years apart. But here's where it gets really interesting. In the Arctic, the sun basically disappears for months. Vitamin D from sunlight? Gone. And a lot of the fats these cultures were using, especially seal fat, came from animals with diets rich in vitamin D. Some researchers think that fat absorbed through the skin may have been providing real nutritional benefit. So ancient people applying seal fat to their skin before heading into the Arctic darkness might have been doing two things at once, blocking wind chill and getting a vitamin D top-up. Did they know that? Probably not in those words, but they knew it worked, and they kept doing it. That's pretty smart for people without Google. Layering. Okay, this one seems obvious. Multiple layers trap air, trapped air equals insulation. We all know this. But here's the part nobody talks about, the really clever part. Ancient cold climate clothing wasn't just designed to keep you warm. It was specifically designed to stop you from sweating. That sounds backwards, right? You're freezing. Why would you not want to get warmer? Because sweat in -40 is a death sentence. Here's what happens. You're working hard, running, hauling, building. Your body heats up. You start sweating. That sweat soaks into your innermost insulating layer. Wet insulation loses almost all of its protective value. Then you stop moving, and suddenly you're standing in brutal cold, wearing layers that basically do nothing. That's how people die. The Inuit clothing system, the most sophisticated cold-weather garment design ever created, was built around preventing that scenario. The collar and cuffs could be opened during high-effort activities to vent heat, then sealed back up when you slowed down. The goal wasn't maximum warmth. The goal was staying dry. 2 separate anorak layers, inner fur facing the skin, outer fur facing the wind, with a regulated air gap between them. The seams were stitched to be windproof without losing flexibility. The hide selection for each garment component was intentional and specific. Making a complete Inuit winter suit was a serious engineering task. The women who mastered it were performing some of the most technically complex work in those societies, and the quality of that work had direct life-or-death consequences. Now let's talk food, because this is where things get really interesting and a little smelly. Traditional Arctic and subarctic peoples, Inuit, Yupik, various Siberian groups, practiced controlled food fermentation specifically for winter. Fermented walrus, fermented fish heads, fermented seal flipper. These foods are famously intense. Let's leave it at that. But what they did for survival was critical. Fermentation preserves food without heat, huge when fuel for cooking is limited. It breaks down stuff in raw animal products that makes nutrients harder to absorb. And in some preparations, it actually produces vitamin C, which is wild because vitamin C is almost completely absent from Arctic animal foods in their raw form. And without it, you get scurvy. And scurvy kills you slowly and painfully. Here's the kicker. Ancient Arctic peoples were preventing scurvy through fermented food at a time when the British Royal Navy, with all their scientific resources, was still losing sailors to it. Let that sink in. They didn't understand vitamins. They didn't know what bacteria were. They just knew this food, prepared this way, keeps people alive through winter. Generations of observation turned into a practice that was medically ahead of its time. Last one, and this one's subtle but genuinely satisfying once you see it. Fire management. Where you put a fire matters more than most people realize. The instinct is to put it in the middle of the space. Heat radiates all directions, everyone stays warm, right? Ancient peoples figured out something different. A fire positioned against a back wall, with stones or packed earth behind it acting as a reflector, pushes radiant heat outward toward where people are sleeping. A central fire wastes half its heat on the wall behind it. Archaeological evidence from ancient shelters consistently shows strategic fire placement, not centered for socializing, angled for maximum heat delivery to sleeping areas. And then there's heated stones. You heat rocks in the fire, then move them inside the sleeping space. No open flame, no smoke, just steady, lasting heat. They can be reheated with a small fire rather than a huge continuous one. You can also drop them into water. Warm drinking water in winter is a massive deal. Or press them against a cold injured body part to bring circulation back. The catch? You had to know which stones were safe. Some rocks, especially ones with trapped moisture, explode when heated fast. The knowledge of which stones were okay was practical, hard-won, and passed down carefully. Here's the thing. None of these people had textbooks, no chemistry degrees, no weather apps, no insulated North Face jackets. What they had was attention, observation across seasons, knowledge passed carefully from one generation to the next, constant refinement of what worked and what got people killed. That's not primitive. That's a research program, just without the lab. Next time you complain about the cold, and yeah, we all do it, remember, somewhere out there, one of your ancestors built a structurally sound dome out of snow, greased their face with bear fat, put on a hand-stitched fur system designed to manage sweat at -50 degrees, and went to work. We've got a lot to learn from them.